Chair. The purpose of this webinar is to educate voters on topics including voting rights, redistricting, the 2024 election, as well as updates from the local NAACP. Our guest speakers are Jared Evans, Senior Policy Counsel of the Legal Defense Fund, Hamid Susi, Voting Rights Attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and our very own Soror Yolanda Morton Singleton, attorney of Ascension Parish chapter of the NAACP chair. I will now turn it over to our chapter president, Laura Shanikia McCauley Spears, for welcome and opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining this very important voter mobilization and social action webinar. We hope you get engaged and listen to the information being presented by the three members on tonight, ask questions, and just stay motivated to get out there and do the work. So again, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Parker at this time. And again, thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Laura, President. So at this time, we're gonna turn it over to our first speaker, Soror Yolanda Morton Singleton, to bring us updates from the local NAACP. Soror Morton Singleton.
Thank you, Sarah Parker and Madam President, for those greetings. I bring you greetings from the Ascension Parish branch of the NAACP. Of course, we're the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded in 1909. It is the nation's oldest and most widely recognized civil rights organization. It was formed in New York City by both Black and white activists. And I'd like to share our mission for you quickly this evening. Our mission is to achieve equity, political rights, and social inclusion by advancing policies and practices that expand human and civil rights, eliminate discrimination, and accelerate the well-being, education, and economic security of Black people and all persons of color. So for 115 years now, the NAACP continues to lead the charge in the civil rights struggle and fighting injustices such as housing discrimination, education, voting rights, redistricting. We'll hear about that later on in the program, and disparity in healthcare. And as you know, the NAACP spearheaded the drive to win the passage of major civil rights legislation on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and our Fair Housing Act of 1968. And those are just some initiatives. Those are near and dear to me, of course, the fair housing. And we continue even now fighting for the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So what do we need right now from everyone for the NAACP? We like to boast that we're the nation's oldest and boldest, but we still have to have members to sustain. The average age of our membership is, seasoned age, should I say. So we do need some fresh blood. We need some new blood to sustain the organization. When something goes wrong, of course, everyone likes to call the NAACP, and most people who call the NAACP for assistance and help because they know our track record are not even members. So of course, we still need membership, and our efforts are mainly due to the volunteerism and our grassroots efforts. And of course, our biggie, how we can stay involved is voter participation. I don't want to do a spoiler for our other speakers because they will bring that and knock that on out the park for us later on this evening, but can't say enough about voter participation. And it's really sad, and it saddens me that we have to beg us to get out to the polls now and to get out to vote. And it's largely due to probably, I say us and our Generation X folk that kind of right after the baby boomers, we sort of didn't do a good job bridging that gap and making sure that people remember the story and remember the struggle and didn't pass that on to our children, because by and large, our kids have been going to school in integrated spaces, and sometimes, you know, the only one of us in that space. So it's things they don't know and things that's been lost. But the NAACP on a national, state level, and even locally, we are devoted to creating policy that's going to impact Black entrepreneurship, that's going to close the generational wealth divide. And the easiest way, I guess probably the lowest hanging fruit in that area, is in the area of our airships property. That's a big area, huge area. And I'm from rural Louisiana. And in a lot of those places, you know, it's all air property. People own it. They never subdivide the property. They never parse it out so that, you know, we can get the property back in commerce. People can do things, build on it, use the land, you know, for to undergird different entrepreneurial efforts. So the property is just tied up. This is something that's near and dear to me. I'll be doing some personal work on this through my nonprofit, dealing with educating our people in our communities about the importance of doing successions, doing wills and successions, and getting this property back into the stream of commerce. Now, also what we're doing is we've been sending very impactful messaging to our state legislators. Of course, this is, you know, heavy session, a robust session going on. We've already had, and I'll talk about the special crime session that we had before I toss it to our next speaker. But we've been sending unified messaging, impacting and bombarding the legislators, because even though it seems bleak, and even though we know they are the super majority, what we can still do right now is create a record, okay? So that's what we're doing. We're creating records. That's what our cards being put in the legislature, sending email comments, whatever, lodging and placing letters. And that's what we can do. We can create records. And Mr. Evans will talk about, you know, the impact and the effect of creating records and what that did for us with redistricting. Okay, so you go, well, we can't do anything. We're outvoted anyway. Create the record. Put your card in, lodge your comment, say you disagree with it, put that in. So that's work that we're doing. And we sort of, on our big major issues, we are creating more or less our elevator speech. And so everybody all over the state is kind of sending the same message everywhere. So that's been effective. We may not be, you know, getting the legislation killed, but we are impacting and creating the record. I can't impress upon you enough. Create the record, lodge your comment into the record, okay? And so the other thing I want to talk about quickly, I just want to highlight 3 or 4 bills that are really impacting us and almost taking us a huge step back. And these are bills that just passed in the recent special session we had with the crime bills. And you can just, I'll call these out and you can jot them down. House Bill 1, House Bill 4, House Bill 9, and Senate Bill 5. All of these pieces of legislation restrict a convicted person's ability to get post-conviction relief. All right. And that's a parole and early release based on good time and credit and earned credit. You will hear a lot that's going on right now. Everybody's saying, you know, they're doing away with the good time credit. They're doing away with the good time credit. Well, the effect of that is going to reduce the defendant's incentive to accept a plea bargain, and it will really lead them to a trial by jury. So what can we do? Because what we have to do is, once these bills are passed, we have to make sure we're doing something, you know, positive on the other end. We can make sure we are register to sit on juries. We can make sure that we keep our voter registration up, because we cannot get out of jury duty. We have to now be on the jury so that they can get fair trials. Okay, so that's what those bills are doing. House Bill 11 will mandate incarceration for technical probation and parole violations. What that means is they're out on parole and for a technical parole violation, it's going to kick them back into a pretrial status. So then they're back in jail again immediately. Okay, this is considered a new charge at this point. The violation will be the technical, not anything substantive, a technical violation. So these are all things that are, of course, impacting us and will impact many of our families. Another one, and this was a biggie, and for those of us in education and so forth, Senate Bill 3 and Senate Bill 11. Those two bills lowered the age of juveniles, and they are now facing adult prosecution at age 17, okay, now. And we know what this is going to do. It's just going to cause an influx of us in the jail houses. But what's impacting our youth the most, even though this was passed statewide, we still have federal laws that this will implicate, because even though they're 17 and being tried as an adult here, there are prison laws, federal prison laws, that won't allow them to be mixed with adults in the jail. So it's all kinds of impacts and effects that happen with this. They have to be, separated by sight and sound from adults in these facilities. When you put them in with the adults, within 72 hours, they have to do psych and mental, almost like on suicide watch. It's what they're put on, and that's how they're treated, because these are kids with adults, and mostly kids that are there because of lack of supervision, parental supervision in many cases. And so this thing is systemic. It's hitting the houses and households they're coming from aren't conducive necessarily. So they're just mimicking what they see in their homes. And so, but our big takeaway from this too is that these are unfunded mandates. There is nothing in these bills to help these kids once they're there. What's happening is, because it's unfunded mandates, there's nothing in the bill to develop them to get skills, any intervention, no mental health, no education. There's nothing in the legislation for this. So that's where our grant writing and our programming and all of that can come in, even in the jail systems. And what can we do again in those areas? We can impact we need to be on the front end. We don't need to be monitoring legislation. We need to be reaching out to our legislators and saying, hey, we want you to put in legislation to increase or protect rather the public defenders' budgets. We want you to put in legislation, because they're there and they half the time they don't have representation and can't pay for a private attorney. So these are bills and things that we can get ahead of. Also, a big area that we need to deal with is dealing with the constitutionality of bail bonds and setting bonds. If you set one for $500, you may as well say $50,000, because they don't even have $500. Okay, so then they are sitting there and it's looking like our jails are just filled with Black people. Only Black people are committing crimes. No, the other people have the resources to get out. So to post bail and to get out. So those are some of the things on the horizon that I thought worth mentioning to you in our social action space here. And also wanted to impress upon you, if you are not, hey, it's a good time to get involved in the NAACP. It's $30 a year for membership, probably the cheapest membership subscription out of all of the other agencies that we are a part of. We do have opportunity for full lifetime memberships. I'm a card-carrying life member of the NAACP proudly. And just ask that we get involved. Y'all, I can't say it enough. Sarah Parker mentioned it on the call the other day, but we are asleep at the wheel. So this is where we need to really be involved, be impactful, and bring somebody else along, your family members or what have you. But that is my time. And Sarah Parker, we are ready for the next speaker.
Yes, ma'am. So, our next speaker that we have is, Mr. Jared Evans. He is again, a senior policy counsel with the Legal Defense Fund. And Mr. Evans, if you would like to share more about yourself with us, we would appreciate it. And, we're excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Jared Evans. It's a great honor to be with y'all. I'm sorry I can't stay the whole time. Y'all picked such a wonderful day to host this event. Today is actually LDS anniversary. 84 years ago today, Thurgood Marshall founded the Legal Defense Fund as a separate entity from the NAACP. Some of our history is that we were originally the legal division of the NAACP, and worked and represented Black Americans all across the country. But 84 years ago today, Thurgood Marshall founded us as the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So I had to drop to attend an event to celebrate our anniversary. But it's such an honor to be here with y'all. I have to commend Delta Sigma Theta for your commitment to social justice and activism. In Texas, LDF is suing the state of Texas for a voter suppression bill that they passed that has a discriminatory impact on elderly people, on black and brown voters, and the disabled. And the Deltas are our clients. And it's really great to go to court every day surrounded by red and white. When we started the redistricting process way back in 2021, at all of the road shows that we held across the state, the Deltas were the only Divine Nine organization to come and to testify. The president of many of the chapters testified. I remember in New Orleans and in Baton Rouge and in Shreveport. And just every single step of the redistricting process, the Deltas have been there with us in court. When we argued before the Fifth Circuit last October, there was a strong red and white contingent, and I just cannot stress enough how important that is to us and how much it means to have your continued support. It's also an honor to be here with, y'all call her Sarah Martin, but I know her as Yolanda because she was my first boss when I was a law student. She's the one who taught me how to be a lawyer. So all these cases that I'm winning across the state and across the country, a lot of that is in credit to the great legal training that she gave me. But I'll talk to you about the three major cases that we have going on. And I'll kind of talk about, I want to reflect a little bit on what Yolanda was saying about how important that record is. And I'll also throw in where the Deltas have been a part of that process as well. So we have the civil rights community has three major redistricting cases going on across the state of Louisiana right now. And I'll start with the biggest one that y'all probably have heard of, which is Congress, a case called Robinson v. Landry. We sued the state of Louisiana to get a second majority Black congressional district in 2022. It has been a long process. The road shows for the congressional case started in September of 2021. That is a long time ago. A lot has happened since then. We were all still wearing masks, and not everybody had been vaccinated back then. But that's how long this case has been going on. In January of this year, finally, after a very long, arduous process, very high level, intense litigation between all three levels of the judiciary, the district court, the appellate court, and the Supreme Court, we finally were able to get a map with a second majority Black district. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. Right now, all the Black voters in Louisiana are packed into one single congressional district. It is the ugliest, most gerrymandered district in the country. It starts way down in New Orleans picks up parts of Ascension, not all of it, but meanders along the Mississippi River, getting as small as the stretch of I-10 in some places. And then once it meanders up to North Baton Rouge, it gets really big again and gets all of North Baton Rouge, including Salem University. We sued on that district. Our argument was that Louisiana's Black population is geographically compact and large enough to support 2 majority Black congressional districts. As I mentioned, we sued in March of 2022, and we just got resolution this year. The legislature, they did not pass our map. Our map was a much more compact map that included North Baton Rouge with St. Landry Parish, Monroe, and Alexandria. It went straight up the Mississippi border. For political reasons, the legislature passed a different map that connects North Baton Rouge with Shreveport. And so District 2 in the new map, instead of going north to Baton Rouge, it goes over to the west to pick up parts of Iberville and St. Martin and St. Mary and part of the Acadiana region. But it is still a majority Black district. District 6, which currently is represented by Garrett Graves, the legislature took that district and made it a majority Black district. And that map that district includes Baton Rouge and East Baton Rouge Parish, West Baton Rouge, Point Capee, St. Landry, Avoyelles, Rapides, Natchitoches, DeSoto, and just Caddo, and just Shreveport and Caddo, not all of Caddo Parish. And that, as of the governor signed that map on January 22nd, was a Monday, and with his signature, that map is a law. And until a court says, what's important for y'all to know is that until a court says otherwise, Louisiana has 2 majority Black congressional districts. And that map currently is the map that we expect the candidates will be running on this fall. There has been another challenge to that map, unfortunately. A group of voters who call themselves non-African American voters sued and claimed that the map was illegally drawn and that race was the predominant factor, which the Supreme Court has said you can't do. And so we'll be back in court in Shreveport on April 8th and 9th in the federal court there to defend that map. But I'm confident that the current map that Governor Landry signed in January is going to be the map that's in place this fall. Their argument is that race was the predominant factor, but thanks to the Deltas and thanks to the NAACP and to many other organizations who came to the Capitol and testified and helped us build a record, we have a robust legislative record that shows that politics was the motivating factor, and that this map should be the map that that should be in place for this fall. And we would not have this victory. This is a very unlikely victory to get any kind of map that creates equity and expands access and to Black and brown voters. To get it from this legislature, to get it from this governor is a miracle unto itself. But the legislative record that we built over years, and I keep going back to the roadshow because it was so foundational in our case. And if you read the court's opinion, they cite so much of the public testimony from the roadshows and from the actual 2 or 3 different redistricting sessions that we had, and then every step of the way, the Deltas were there testifying in their red and white, and local NAACP chapters and local Black Voters Matters chapters, local Black churches really just came out and had and insisted that their voices be heard and advocated for a second majority Black district, and that's really what has brought forth the victory in this case. So we are very, very excited anytime you get a win. Like as I said, in Louisiana, especially from the Fifth Circuit, all lawyers on the call know how difficult it is to bring a case affecting Black and brown bodies before the Fifth Circuit. It's the most conservative out of the 11 circuits in the country. And it's always very hostile to civil rights cases. But the fact that we got such a positive ruling from them definitely speaks to how strong the legislative record was. So thank y'all for that. So that is Congress. Let's talk about the state legislature. So when the legislature drew their own districts, two years ago, they didn't add any new Black seats, even though the census numbers showed that the Black population increased and the white population decreased. And so we sued on that map. Our argument was that the legislature could have drawn 6 additional Black seats in the House and 3 additional Black seats in the Senate. In that case, again, they have appealed and fought that case for a long time. We finally had a trial in Baton Rouge last December, actually the week right after Bayou Classic. And just last month, we got a very favorable ruling. Judge Shelley Dick of the Middle District ruled in our favor, struck down the legislative maps, and said that Louisiana has a very long history of discrimination, not just in voting, but she went back so far as to cite, you know, the lynchings and the racial massacres that have taken place in Louisiana. She talked about the disparities in education and in healthcare and in housing. Yolanda earlier was talking about Black land loss. You know, she cited so much of that in her ruling. She talked about the disparities in incarceration rates, in in education attainment, you know, high school dropout rates. She really gave a full exegesis on racial discrimination in Louisiana's long history of oppression, going all the way back to slavery, the Confederacy, and Jim Crow. So we just overjoyed to get that decision. Yolanda talked so much about what's going on at the Capitol and how we might be in the minority. But just think about if it was 6 less of them and 6 more of us in the House, and 3 less of them in the Senate and 3 more of us in the Senate. That would be a game changer. That would take away their supermajority. So this case is just so foundational to everything that's going on right now. She gave a really, really good explanation of everything that's happened at the Capitol with the bills. And our argument to the court is that every time the legislature meets under these maps that have been declared illegal, the state and Black voters suffer an injury. These maps are a violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, but yet they are passing and voting on reforms that will have an effect on Black lives. So we are pushing to get a new election as soon as possible, hopefully this fall. It might be next year because they've appealed to the Fifth Circuit. But we are fighting that case tooth and nail, and are hopeful to get a special election as soon as the courts allow us to have additional minority representation in the House and the Senate. So that's the state legislature. And the third redistricting case that we sued on was the Supreme Court. Again, the census numbers from 2020 show that Louisiana's Black population increased, the white population decreased, but yet when the legislature failed to redraw the Supreme Court, there's still only 1 out of 7 Black seats. And that's based in New Orleans. It was previously represented by Justice Bernice Johnson, and now is represented by Justice Piper Griffith. We have sued our colleagues, the Lawyers Committee, have also sued. So there's 2 cases going on to get a greater minority representation on the state Supreme Court. And we are hopeful that the legislature passes a map with a second majority Black district there sometime in the coming weeks. Last week, they passed the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee passed 3 different maps out of committee that create additional minority seat. And all 3 of them have that additional minority seat, but they still maintain Justice Griffith's district and have another minority seat that is anchored in Baton Rouge. And so we are hopeful this is the legislature's 4th bite at the apple with this. In the first special session, when they did redistricting in January, a map was introduced. It didn't pass the Senate. Last month, in the special crime session they had, a map was introduced. It passed the House, but again failed the Senate. But this time, we've been working hard behind the scenes to get the map out of the Senate. It's passed the committee, and from what we've been told, next week, all 3 of these bills will be heard in the Senate, and at some point, one will get over to the House and hopefully to Governor Landry's desk. But none of these victories, as I mentioned, would be possible without the great organizing work that has gone on the ground So certainly thanks to the NAACP. Also, my dear friend Ashley Shelton, who runs the Power Coalition, they've been our partners in this work. And so to everyone who has come out and testified and put in a green card in favor of VAPs that create equity and add additional minority representation, and red cards against the ones that don't, thank you. All of that has been cited by the courts. The court, despite what people might tell you, they look at the record. They are paying attention to what's going on at the Capitol. That has great consequence. It has been and will continue to be of great consequence to our litigation. So again, thank you, and I'll be happy to hopefully come back in a few months with some more positive updates to say that the map has been finalized in the congressional case, and to let y'all know when we'll have a special election. Last thing I'll add is that the three, for the state legislative case, the three areas that the court identified that could have additional minority representation. First, in the Senate, additional minority seat could be created in Shreveport. One could be created in the Baton Rouge region, and one would be created in Jefferson Parish. And in the House, the court identified Shreveport, Lake Charles, and Baton Rouge again as the areas where additional minority seats could be created. And actually, in our map, there are 3 new majority Black districts in Baton Rouge alone. And anytime you have a situation where 3 seats can be added to one area, you know that that means that there is severe gerrymandering all taking place, that Black voters are already packed into certain areas and then cracked in other areas. So we hope to have 3 additional Black seats in the House in the Baton Rouge region.
Thank you so much. That's very informative. Thank you so much. I think Sora Martin Singleton would like to recognize a few people on the call before we move to our next speaker.
Yes, thank you, Sarah Parker. I was remiss, I couldn't see all of the squares, but we do have on with us our state NAACP president of the Louisiana State Conference. Mr. Michael McClanahan is on, and I do want to, I don't know if we want to do this now at the end, give him an opportunity to say something. Then also I was remiss, and I didn't see her pretty face here. I see it in the block here. Our Vice President for the Ascension Parish branch is our very own Miss Cherry Wells. And so I was remiss in mentioning Cherry Wells earlier. So I wanted to do that. Sarah Parker or Madam President, let me know if how we want to do this. If Mr. McClanahan wants to have a few words now, bring greetings from the state conference.
It will be up to you all. I'm not sure if Mr. McClanahan will stay on after you all completely finish presenting, and then that way he can have the floor afterwards. That may be easier if it's easier to continue with your presentation.
Okay.
If possible, we could continue with Mr. Hamid Susi and allow him to present, and then we could give the floor to the state president of the NAACP. Sorry.
No, no problem. First of all, thank you all for having me. Thank you, Ms. Yolanda, for inviting me. My name is Ahmed Susi. I am an attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center in New Orleans, and I focus on voting rights. And just hearing everything that you said, Ms. Yolanda, about even though there's a supermajority in the House and a lot of the pro-voting rights, pro-democracy things that we want to get passed might not happen, building that record is important. And I'm putting my email in the chat so you guys have my contact information. But one of the reasons why I wanted to come here to talk today is to talk about not only the threats that we face, people who are trying to make voting more universal, more easier, which should be in everyone's, that shouldn't be a controversial position trying to make voting easy, but also ways that we can challenge it and ways that we can actually make sure people are able to vote here in Louisiana. So I'm gonna start with the bad news and then talk about ways that we can try to fight this. So one of the first things though that I was asked to talk about was voter registration drives. And as of right now, there's, if you want to hold a voter registration drive, that's your right. There are certain requirements about how soon or the deadline of when you would have to return someone's ballot or someone's application. But as of now, you could have that voter registration drive. Unfortunately, though, in the Louisiana legislature, there are pending legislation that would require mandatory registration with the Secretary of State to be able to do a voter registration drive, which is kind of crazy to have that sort of requirement. It's not the most restrictive we've seen, but one of the unknowns here is that the bill says that the Secretary of State is going to create a procedure for that registration. So it might be a situation where once the actual details are ironed out, there might be some problematic parts, but it's still just another thing, another barrier for making voter registration accessible. And one of the other things too is if you go into a situation where, because one of the things they're trying to stop, or they're trying to say they're trying to stop, is how much paper is going out. They want to know who's giving it out. But if, a lot of times people are registering voters with iPads through the Go Vote app or other ways, right? So it's all electronic, it's all instant. There's not really these papers running around. But this mandatory registration is something that we're going to keep an eye on. But I just wanted you all to know that, because once that law, and I believe it would go into effect as of now in August 2024. So something to keep in mind for the November general election. One of the things too that I focus on is absentee voting, making sure those who are often forgotten when we talk about voting rights, especially at the polling places. I'm not going to get on my soapbox to talk about how inaccessible voting places are, but one of the jobs that Jared and I do during election season is election protection. So I want to make sure, I know everyone on this call may already know, but there is the 866 Our Vote hotline. And if anyone this upcoming primary or faced an issue or have seen some issue so far, and I'll put it in the chat, make sure to contact that hotline, because it's a database that we voting rights advocates can go back to say, okay, we've seen 6 of the same issue in Lake Charles. Let's see what we can do. So one of the most often calls that we get is, hey, the polling place doesn't have a ramp, or hey, the polling place is in the middle of, of this green patch. How am I supposed to get there with a wheelchair or something like that? So we thankfully, I also work in Mississippi. So thankfully, there are a lot of ways for voters to vote in Louisiana through the absentee ballot. But there are certain restrictions. And right now, the legislature is trying to add more restrictions onto who can assist someone marking their ballot, who can actually return someone's ballot in the mail for them, and who can actually help them get their application to even get an absentee ballot. And those laws right now are, it says that only an immediate family member can assist more than one person. But, a lot of times we see, especially in communities where there are, voting rights experts, right? I know, in Mississippi, right, we have this one lady, and she helps 10 different people, right? Because they know she's the person who, in their small counties, the most educated about voting rights, the person that they trust. A law like this, if it were to actually pass, which we saw from the crime session, they're passing whatever they want to pass, would severely disenfranchise voters with disabilities. The good news is that the law here is actually very strong. Jared mentioned Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. There's another section that sometimes forgotten, and that's called Section 208, and it guarantees that voters with not just disabilities or what you're thinking about it, I'm unable to use my hands or something like that, but the inability to read or write, or it's really kind of like a personal thing. So if you have some sort of arthritis, or it's just hard for you to mark the ballot, it doesn't have to be some sort of harsh thing. You have the right to select the person of your choice, other than a union rep or your employer, to assist you with marking the ballot. So that guarantee is actually something the Fifth Circuit has even affirmed. So this is kind of the case where Louisiana is trying to pass laws that most likely will get struck down. And that's something SPLC and a bunch of other civil rights orgs are making sure that try to build the record now. I mean, one of the bills actually just passed the Senate, is going to the House. So they're moving quickly, but we're going to make sure that if it eventually gets to the governor's desk and they sign it, they understand that we're going to hold them accountable, not only SPLC, but the community. So for those who do absentee voting or are involved in any part of the process, know that there are some restrictions coming, and that we're here to make sure that hopefully we can try to stop it before the November election if we're able to. But I'd love to connect with anyone who does anything around absentee voting. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and if anyone has questions, please feel free to stop and just ask. I know I'm saying a lot, but please don't wait for me to end. If you have a question, feel free to go ahead and ask. But another thing that we're passionate about is voter registration, making sure people are registered to vote. And the federal law kind of forces states to make sure that they're registering voters. And one of those places that you're supposed to be registered is the OMV and other public assistant offices. But sometimes we've seen that when you go to the OMV to get a license or update or get a state ID or update that, they're not asking people to register. They're not asking if you want to register to vote. Or if they are asking you if you want to register to vote, the actual registration doesn't go through. When I moved to Louisiana and I got my my driver's license, they didn't ask me. I brought it up to them, and then I waited a month and I never received my voter registration card in the mail. It wasn't until I called them that they said they didn't have a record of my application. And I'm a voting rights attorney, right? So these are just and to me, I don't look at the passage of the legislation, right? I could definitely see some issues there of intent and stuff like that. But to the OMV thing, it's more of just, to me personally, how I look at it as it's not being prioritized when the federal law makes it a requirement, right? And that kind of goes back to us demanding that not for the exceptional things, but them doing the bare minimum of their jobs. And when I say that, I'm not talking just about the OMV clerks, but it starts from the top all the way. So the Secretary of State, the people who are in charge of the OMV. And that's why one of the things that we're seeing now when we're going into the community talking about not only the upcoming election, but November is, that voter apathy. And one of the things I tell people all the time is, I can definitely understand, especially with so much of the negativity that's happening in the world, at the most highest level, right? But what's happening also in your city council, in your parish council, what's happening at your school board, what's happening at your state and house representative, right? So many people, going back, what judges are we electing? Who are the prosecutors that we're electing? These are all people that we're the bosses of, right? We hold them accountable. And one of our failures that I think not just, I think that goes across not Louisiana, any state, is missing the mark. Because once we're able to have a strong foundation, then we're going to be able to make, mountains move at the national level. And conversations like this is kind of the bedrock. And to Jared's point, you all have already done so much. So I'm preaching to the choir. It's not me telling you all to vote for your local elections, but it's just making sure that for the people who are not in this room, which I know you guys are already doing, making sure they know that who is sitting on these parish councils, your school board, stuff like this is crucial. That sets the expectation for the next generation. So even though there are bad things coming down the pipe, SPLC, LDF, and all the other civil rights organizations here in Louisiana are going to make sure to fight them tooth and nail to uphold our basic civil rights. But some of the things like that mandatory voter registration is at this point, right, not something that's an automatic, oh, this violates the law, right? But it's a way that they could put another hurdle from stopping to make it so accessible. And that's just a policy choice, right? So making sure that the people who vote for that type of bill have to be accountable when they come back into the cities where they are and start talking about, oh, how can I get your guys' support? Well, let's go back and let's look at what bills you voted for and holding people accountable. So people power is truly an amazing resource. And I'm always so proud to be part of the Louisiana civil rights history, as well as all of you. I always tell my family, I'm originally from Arizona. I always tell my family, right, this is where, desegregation happened, right? Not only Ruby Bridges, but so many other people. And just getting to be a part of this makes me proud. And whenever I see bad actors try to make especially voting harder, it's just like, if you look at the scoreboard, we're going to come and we're going to come hard, we're going to fight hard. So that's kind of my presentation. But if anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to ask.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the information. We really appreciate it. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to Sarah Martin Singleton. I know you had remarks from some of our additional guests.
I think Sarah Spears had a hand up.
Yes, I wanted to ask one quick question for Mr. Susi. I know you said that the bill passed and it could possibly go into effect in August concerning being registered with the Secretary of State to hold voter registration drives. What sort of registration are they? Would it consist of? Do you have to be a nonprofit? What would you have to do to be considered registered with the Secretary of State to do that?
So those details aren't ironed out yet. I definitely, if they had some sort of provision like that, that would violate the law where they're saying only certain people can do voter registration, right? That's a First Amendment type issue. So it's just now just saying, all right, if you're not like what we're saying who don't do voter registration like the OMB, right? If you're not like a government agency, you have to register but I don't think it'll be something where it's like you could only be a C4 or a C3 or anything like that. But there might be other type of onerous requirements that the Secretary of State might have, which might become an issue where they'll say, we want your charter, or we want these 7 documents for you to be considered registered, right? This is just me spitballing. There's nothing like that in the law. It kind of lays it for the Secretary of State to do that. So that's kind of the next step of what would happen after that bill would be passed.
And I did have one question. You said that if anyone wanted to connect with you on absentee voting, what type of assistance are you looking for, and what can Delta Sigma Theta do to assist you in that effort?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that. So a couple things. So if you all do any assistance or any outreach to voters who do vote absentee, I'd love to connect with you and maybe the people that you assist, because how this law works, right? If let's say, for example, that you guys do a thing where you'll go into people who need assistance and help them either mark their ballot or help them take their ballot into the mail, or even one of the laws that they're trying to pass is to ban the solicitation of voter registration application, right? So you cannot go to someone and say, hey, here's an application for absentee voting, right? So if in your guys' normal voter registration activities, if you guys are, when someone says, hey, well, I can't go to the polls, and you say, and I mean, this might be more of like the factual details of how that would go by a court if that is enough for solicitation. But if you guys were just to say, hey, I see that you're in a wheelchair, I just want you don't have to go to the polls. You could vote absentee. Here's an application, right? They're trying to ban that too. So if your guys' chapter does anything around that, I'd love to connect and talk to you guys about those procedures. But also one of the things, especially our office is in New Orleans, but we represent the whole state, is people who need language assistance, right? Especially we have such a huge Vietnamese community in New Orleans, right? If there's an organization that goes out and helps 6 people who might not speak English, which the absentee ballot has, or something like that, right? Only an immediate family member could help multiple people. So any type of absentee work that you all do, please send me an email, and I'd love to connect on how we can work together.
Thank you.
Great. As you're looking for Q&A hands raised, Sarah Parker, I did want to say Mr. McClanahan is on, and we do want to give him the floor. One thing I want to comment on that Mr. Susi spoke of, he says he's preaching to the choir. Yes, he may be, but the reason why we even create spaces like this for informed people like us is to sometimes rehearse for our hearing, because we know other people that's not like us. So we can take this messaging to family, to friends, or whatever. And the one thing I failed to mention, this was a couple of sessions ago, but it's still a huge effort Some of us have somebody in our family that was formerly incarcerated or something like that, all right? So we want to make sure we let those people know that they can still vote. I had somebody, one of our members in the NAACP, her husband, he was incarcerated 20-something years ago. She says, how can he go vote? Go register. He can register to vote. If you're no longer serving a sentence, or not on probation, or if you've been off parole, I think it is, and Mike can correct me, for over 5 years, then all of those persons can vote. They just need to go back and register wherever they live in their area and register to vote again. But that's why we thank you, Mr. Susie, as well. That's why we do, hold these kinds of meetings and venues and spaces, because sometimes we have to remind us to reach out to, other people we know, church members and so forth. So thank you. I will, at this time, yield the floor to our state NAACP conference president. He'll clean that up. I always mess that up. Dr. Michael McClanahan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I really want to thank the Deltas, I'm telling you, for always being in the game. I have yet to be in a fight where a Delta wasn't somewhere close to me. I want to thank y'all for continuing the fight, because the battle is not the NAACP's, it's all of ours. And I'm glad you all take that seriously. In reference to the special sessions that we had and the session that started, the governor told us when he was running what he was going to do. In order for us to throw out his efforts, we had to go to the polls and vote. The numbers are staggering of those who did not go to the polls and vote. It was a time when we took voting seriously. And Martin Luther, people like to quote Martin, but Martin says, if nothing else, he says, give me the ballot. All my problems will be solved. Give me the ballot. All my problems. I mean, healthcare problems, street problems, drainage problems, educational problems, healthcare problems. All those will be solved because I can elect somebody that had my best interest, my people's best interest at heart. And we don't do that. We'll have parties for everything, but we won't have a voting party. Our brother Ahmed was talking about registering. There's a law passed in Louisiana that says if you go to DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, either to get a license, an ID, or some work at DMV, they're supposed to give you a voter registration application. That means if you're not registered, they're supposed to give you one. And it's not up to you to decide whether or not you're registered. Let them say that you're not registered. We can work from that. The other part to it is that we have been fighting, all the cases that Jared talked about. The NAACP was the lead plaintiff. We put our lives and our names on the line because we know how important it is to this state. But we don't do it haphazardly. We do it because we have thought strategy sessions. I'm glad to say not only does Yolanda, but she's always pulling her friends in, which is what you're supposed to do. Because we can't keep all this to ourselves and then think when stuff go good, we're going to get all the glory. No, that's not how it works. No, it's not how it works. If you have a big head, don't stand beside me. I don't, because you'll drown me out. The work is too good. And I want to encourage all of us to call our legislators, no matter where you're from. If you live in North Louisiana, tell your mama and your dad and your cousins to start calling these people. Because right now they'll leave from where they had come to Baton Rouge, feel empowered, and go back home like nothing happened. No. If they're doing something adversely to us that's going to affect you for generations to come, they need to feel uncomfortable. Not only here in Baton Rouge, but they need to feel uncomfortable back in Homer, in Monroe, in Jonesville, Alexander, Zawala. They need to feel uncomfortable. And so we need to strategize calling them, sending letters and emails to them. Let them know that our displeasure. We don't want you to hang me and not kiss me. No, I ain't playing none of that. We need to let them know that it's not right because as you all know, we'll be fading out based upon age and time. And the next generation behind us will be stuck. We can't leave it. We can't leave it for them like that. And so I want to encourage all of you to get involved. I appreciate this webinar. I'm driving, pulled over the side of the road because I know it's important that we interact with one another. I'm also a member of the oldest fraternity, but they have a responsibility too. I don't want them to say we got these alphabets on our chest and that's where my responsibility ends. Oh no, oh no. We all must play a part, a role, and a serious role. And one of our frats talked about fighting on the ice, fighting till hell freezes over, then fighting on the ice. That's real. Because if you look at what the legislature has done, what they're doing, we have to talk about incarcerating our young boys as young as 17 or what have you. There's a little girl in another parish being tried, and she's 11 years old. That's real. We can't let that happen to us and no cost. So I want to thank you all for putting on this webinar, for having Jared and Abed, some of the coldest lawyers I know around working. And Yolanda Martin, she's everybody's boss. Jared says her boss, but she does a good job and I stay in my place. Thank you all. And no justice?
No peace?
No
Nope.
peace.
But thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you to our guests. Before we conclude, I've put an evaluation link in the chat. If you do not mind, before we conclude, and before you log off, if you could please complete the evaluation form. Again, before we go, are there any questions? I do see a hand raised. Sora Carissa Reed has a question. Please go ahead. Okay, she put her hand down. Sorry about. Okay, before we conclude, are there any additional questions before we log off? Hearing none. Again, thank you to our guests, Mr. Jared Evans, Mr. Hamid Susi, and Sarah Yolanda Morton Singleton, as well as our surprise visit from Dr. McClanahan. And I see Sarah Morton Singleton hand is raised as well. Okay, she put her hand down. All right, so President, do you have any closing remarks before we log off?
I don't have anything else to say. I think you said it all, Sora Parker. I just wanted to thank our speakers again so much for giving up your time and everyone on the call to listen, and not only listen, but put some movement behind those words. So just thank you again, everybody. And I'll turn it back to you, Sora Parker.
All right. Well, you all have a wonderful and blessed evening. Good night, and let's get to work. Let's wake up. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.